Warning, today's episode of Media Hobble will be dealing with sexual assault, child loss, and grief. Viewer discretion is advised. So, I know it's been a while since I uploaded a podcast episode. I put on the Instagram after I uploaded the last one that I was going to be taking a break. I think I said a 2-week break because I was finishing my semester. I had so much work to do. If you're in school, you know what that end of the semester is like. You have all this work, all these assignments, everything to finish. So I didn't have the free time. So I gave myself that 2-week break to finish school and then, just relax, I guess, from all the work. And then 2 weeks came up and I watched a few movies, researched, just couldn't do it. And then I put another post saying I'll be back the second week of June. And then here we are. By the time I put this up, it'll be almost the end of June. Life happens and shitty things are going to happen in life that kind of I'm not going to say ruin it because that's I think it's a little dramatic over what's happened to me the past month. But it's just, life sucks and shitty things are going to happen and you just need that time to just cope. And you know what? I feel ready. So I'm ready to come back and do this and record because I want to do something with this podcast. I want to talk about, I love movies. I love books, music, movies. I know I've mostly covered movies and one video game, one TV show, but there's so much more I want to talk about. So I want to do this. You might notice Mauricio's not with me. I did mention in the first episode that I'm not going to always have a person with me. Sometimes I'm going to do it alone. Sometimes I'm going to have a friend. This at the end of the day, this is quote unquote my podcast. I'm the host, but I had Mauricio in those first 5 episodes because he's such a good friend, and I was nervous to do this. I was nervous to start the podcast doing this all alone, recording myself alone, talking alone, and he's being the great friend that he is. He helped me with those first 5 episodes, and Mauricio's in school too, so go Mauricio, and he's got to do what he's got to do. He's doing the important things, and of course I'm gonna have him back soon, but he's got to do his own thing, and of course I want to do episodes alone too. I want to talk about some movies or books or music, anything, or show. I want to talk about some things that I might only be the one that really likes it. Mauricio might not like it, or one of my other friends might not like it, or maybe I just want to do it alone. You never know. So now that I guess did an intro, I'll do a proper intro. So welcome to Media Hobble. If you don't know, this is a podcast about all things media, and it'll be either me by myself like I am right now, or with a friend, and we're gonna just talk about a piece of media and what we like about it and what we don't like about it, and we might have a joke here or there, or might be serious. I just want this to be a comfortable place for everybody. So on that note, I am going to be talking about something that is not the most comfortable piece of media out there. I very much enjoyed this movie. This is obviously why I'm talking about it. Some of you might like it. Some of you might not like it. Some of you might have watched it once and can never watch it again. That's understandable. But you don't gotta listen to this one. There's another one for you. There's the one that's happier. Anyway, so today I'm going to be talking about the 2009 film. I'm going to focus on the film and some of the book, The Lovely Bones. So the movie was directed by Peter Jackson, who has directed the Lord of the Rings movies. I think that's what he's most known for. And the book is by Alice Sebold, and the book came out in 2002. So, like I said, I'm going to focus on the movie. I might talk a little bit about the book here and there, but I really just want to focus on the movie. But to get into the book, it was, of course, written by Alice Sebold, and what happened to her was when she was in college, she was walking home and she was raped, and she got away, luckily, because she later found out that a girl was raped and murdered and dismembered in that same spot. And, not saying she got the best of it, but she got out alive. And, some feel, and she's talked about the tragedy around her, but it just seems like this book is maybe that survivor's guilt, and also dealing with her own trauma. People use art to deal with that stuff. Sometimes people write, sometimes people draw, make movies, make music, or some people have other ways of dealing with it, but this is definitely one. So I did like the book. I will say that. I do enjoy the book. I will say there is that graphic sexual assault scene in the first chapter that is really rough, and it's not for everybody. A lot of people don't like the book because of that scene, which is understandable. It kind of, it's in the first chapter. It sets the tone for the rest of the story. But personally, I see the book and the movie as two different things in a way, because there's so much in the book that is left out in the movie. And I feel like if they ever want to like retry this as something for television or a movie, I personally feel like it should be like a series, like one of those limited series, because there's just so much in the book that is not in the movie, and I feel like it should be there. It really drives the story. But at the same time, I feel if they put all that movie would have been longer, because it already is long. It's over 2 hours long. So, choices have to be made. But anyway, let's get into the movie now. So the movie begins with Susie. She's like 3 or 4 sitting in her room, and there is a little snow globe on the desk, and there's a penguin in it, and she's narrating. Real quick before I get more into the movie, Saoirse Ronan plays Susie Salmon, the girl that is murdered. So she's most known, I guess, nowadays, quote unquote, for Lady Bird and Little Women. And she's amazing in Lady Bird. I have not seen Little Women yet, but she is amazing in Lady Bird. But I just don't like that. I just feel like, how do I put this? I feel sad when I see those are the only 2 movies people talk about when they talk about how great of an actress she is, because she is good in Lady Bird. I'm pretty sure she's good in Little Women because I've seen clips from it. But like, she was only 13 in this movie and she gave such a performance. And I saw Brooklyn too, which she was amazing in. So she narrates throughout the movie, and it's very like, she has that nice like sweet calming voice, and it just like is comforting in a way when she narrates, even though the story is so tragic and so like rough and saddening, but like hearing her voice while she narrates, it's just so like calming. I'll get more into it. So when the movie opens, she sees that penguin in the snow globe, and she says how like it made her sad, and her dad assures her that the penguin's okay, and that he has his own like little perfect life in that snow globe, so he's gonna be okay, and that kind of comforts her. And then it jumps ahead about 12 years later. She's 14. The movie takes place in the 70s, so there's a lot of 70s references, movies, style, fashion, everything. So she's a typical teenage girl in the 70s. She wears bell bottoms and sweater vests with button-ups underneath them, and she has David Cassidy posters in her room and flowers everywhere, and she's taking pictures of herself in her room because she wants to be a photographer when she grows up. She has a typical family, and she has her mom, her dad, her sister, and her brother, and they live that suburban family life. And you see her, she talks about how she wants to be this wildlife photographer, and it's very, when you're that age, you're starting to think about what you want to be when you grow up, and it's that like wondrous, I guess the word is, way to put it. And then you find out that like her little brother Buckley swallowed a twig, and she saved his life. She took her dad's car and drove it to the hospital, and her grandma, who is played by Susan Sarandon, I hope I'm pronouncing her last name right. I'll get more into her when she comes more into the movie, but I do love her in this movie as well. She tells Susie that she's going to live a very long and happy life because she saved her brother's life. And with Susie's narration, she says her grandma was wrong. And it starts with that iconic, which I'm sure everyone has heard, "My name is Salmon, like the fish, first name Susie. I was 14 years old when I was murdered on December 6, 1973. I feel like everyone knows that. Like, that's very familiar to people because it was in the trailer too. And if you've seen the movie, I don't know why that sticks, I guess, because that's also how the book begins as well, but also with the movie. I feel like that sticks because it's like when you watch these movies or read these books, most of the time about someone who's murdered, the person who's murdered is mostly seen in just flashbacks. Like, we don't have their perspective. It's always they're in the movie for the beginning, they're there, they establish them as a character in this life, and then they die, and then you don't hear from them again. You don't really see them again. It's only when it's a flashback to before that person died. And that's also why I really, really enjoy this movie, because it's a different perspective on grief. It's told through the person who died's point of view, not solely the family's point of view. So, you see how they're in the mall after she says that, and she says this something along the lines of, when she was murdered, this was before kids were on milk cartons and they were on the news, because it just seemed during that time in the early 70s, everything was this perfect bubble. They didn't talk about these dangerous things in the world. And then, as like people got television and people became more self-aware and could hear more of these stories about these horrible murders or children getting kidnapped, stuff like that, it brought more self-awareness on this danger. And you see, like, when they're at the mall, they're just, being a family, like, no other way to describe it. And, Susie's in the bookstore with her grandma, and she sees the guy, Ray, who she has a crush on, like I said, typical, I guess, teenage girl things. And what you might notice it in the first time watching it, but as you watch it, even my friend pointed out some parts I didn't notice, because I only noticed one. You see Stanley Tucci as Mr. Harvey, who is the murderer, lingering throughout the mall, and that, like, shocked me. When I watched it with Mauricio, actually, we watched it a few months ago, and there's a part when she's first looking at Ray, Mr. Harvey walks through the window, and Mauricio was like, oh my god, did you see that? And then there's a time I noticed when she's looking at Ray in the record store and Mr. Harvey's standing there. And this is before we established that he's the murderer. And also Stanley Tucci, I love Stanley Tucci. I think my favorite movie with him is Devil Wears Prada, but he's an amazing actor. And I read on, like IMDb facts that he actually lightened his skin. He wore molars. Like, he did everything to change his physical appearance because he didn't want what he really looked like to be associated with a person like that, which I 100% understand. Even though, it's just a character, he's acting, this isn't really who he is. There's just so many people who like that character. You kind of don't want to be that associated with them, other than just knowing this is someone you played. And he's not, like, really in it yet. You see him in the background. Susie's narrating, and she says something, and she says it a couple times, but this is the first time she says it. She says that maybe if something along the lines of, maybe if I was paying attention, I would have known something was going on. And it really touched on that, like, blaming yourself, like, victim blaming thing, that, like, it's the victim's fault that this happened, not the perpetrator's fault. And I know a lot of people think, oh, well, we know it's their fault, we know they're bad people, we don't have to say it, but I feel like the victim should never be brought up, no matter what they're doing in these situations. It should just be not important. So when she's talking about, how she wished she paid attention more and she could have done something, she's talking about how, she's thinking about this guy, Ray, which, again, teenage girl things, or anybody, that's not even just teenage girl. When you're a teenager and if you have crushes, if you're not always thinking about them, but you think about them, especially like with Susie in the mall. She saw him there and she was nervous and scared. She was looking at him. The grandma, is telling her about her first kiss and how great it was. And Susie, she's 14. She hasn't had her first kiss yet. That just seems like a rite of passage at that age to have your first kiss. And while they're talking, you see a man looking at her in the background. And I remember when I did watch this from Mauricio, another friend of ours was there, and he said, oh, that's the murderer looking at her. Look how he's staring at her. He's crazy. And I didn't say anything, and Mauricio didn't say anything either, because he saw this movie previous to when we showed it to two of our friends, and Mauricio's, what am I saying? Mauricio's boyfriend is my friend, so two of my friends and Mauricio's boyfriend, and then their friend or our friend. Anyway, off topic. They're like, that's him. And then Susie narrates, oh, it wasn't Mr. Dwyer, if that's what you thought, because he walks past her. And she's like, he was such a nice guy. He had a daughter, and you see him, he buys a dollhouse. And then she later says that he even lost his daughter, but he lost her to cancer, not murder. And then, that's when we kind of get into Stanley Tucci's, not Stanley Tucci, Mr. Harvey. We get into Mr. Harvey. And she said, the murderer was a man from my neighborhood. I didn't really know him, but she accidentally took his picture once when she was trying to take pictures of the flowers in his front yard. And you see Mr. Harvey just starts getting this, like, deep obsession with Susie. He can't stop thinking about her because he is a sick pervert. And, it's, like, driving him insane, so he starts slowly planning her murder. And then, we get to the day of the murder, pretty much. So her mother is complaining about how, dirty her room is, and she's like, I want you to clean this when you get home. She's like, yeah, I'll do it. And then she opens her box and is like, she opens a box that has film in it. Yes, 21st century things. I don't know what film is. She opens her box of film. She's like, we need to get this all developed. And the mom is like, how did you use all that film we got you for your birthday? And the mom's angry because she feels like, she used it up so quickly. and she's not getting them developed. And then like Susie gets mad and is upset because they're not like supportive of what she likes to do. And then, you know, it's like, it's just such a family. And she goes downstairs, you know, she's 14, got an attitude at that age. She comes downstairs, she's like, I'm gonna be 40 when I see my photos, because before that, the dad, who's played by Mark Wahlberg, and the mom's played by Rachel Weisz, I don't think I mentioned that, the mom's complaining she used all the film. The dad's like, really? Like I said, a family, just a normal family, that's how they act. And the dad's like, all right, so we'll develop one rule a month, because remember in the 70s, like, they don't have digital cameras, so obviously it's going to cost more than it does now. I know when I bring my phone to get pictures developed from there, it's like almost sometimes like 50 cents, maybe $1 for a photo. So the dad's like, one roll a month. Obviously this upsets Susie. This when she goes downstairs and says, I'll be 40 when I see my photos. Parents are like, yeah. They get ready, they go to school, and the mom gives Susie a hat. Susie doesn't like the hat. She thinks it's ugly. The mom's like, well, like, it's cold. Oh, and they live in PA, which I'll get more into the fact that they live in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, for those who don't know what PA is. Pennsylvania. And, you know, the mom's like, you gotta wear the hat. It's freezing outside. Susie doesn't want to wear it because she hates it. So, you know, she leaves. They go, and you see from Mr. Harvey's house, he's watching her walk to school. And then she goes to school, and then she's leaving. It's like the end of the school day. She's leaving the club with her friend. They're just talking. And then the guy she likes, Ray, approaches her and he asks her out. And that's like that real like saddening part, because it starts off the movie. Like, obviously you come into this movie knowing she's going to get murdered. Like that, you know that already when this movie starts. And you just feel sad because, you know, she's getting asked out on a date by the guy that she's been crushing on. That's like your dream when you're a teenager, that your crush asked you out on a date. So, you know, they talk. He says, meet me at the mall on Saturday. There's a little, like, not altercation, but, like, argument between this character, Ruth, who's important later, and they're arguing about a drawing she made because the girl was nude, and that kind of just, like, introduces Ruth as a character, really, to get her, like, into the story. So he's like, meet me at the mall. She leaves. You know, she's walking home. She's excited. Previous to that, she drops all her books when she opens her locker, and Ray puts, like, a piece of paper in a textbook when he's, like, going to ask her out. So she's walking home. She's walking through the soccer field. She's going through the cornfield to go home. And she starts getting cold, so she's digging through her backpack to get her hat, and she drops everything, and the note falls out, and she starts chasing it, and it flies past Mr. Harvey. And that scene is just like where, like, you know, like, this is where the film begins. This is when the movie begins. Now it's beginning, and it's discomforting because you know what's going to happen. You can't stop it. You can't warn her. It's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. So, you know, he's talking to her. You can see she's very like, hi, like, she's trying to be nice. And he is talking to her. He's saying how he's a neighbor, like, trying to be familiar. And then he mentions he built this, like, hangout under the cornfield. And she's like, I have to go home. And he's like, it'll be quick. It's a hangout. And it's kind of like, even though Susie's 14 and a teenager, that's still young. Like, there's still that childhood wonder in you. So he kind of is like, oh, well, you're the first one who's going to see it. And that kind of, like, interests her because, like, she's the first one to see it, and it's like a hangout under the cornfield. That sounds cool. So she starts going, and I like that in the movie when she's walking, like, her feet are slowly crunching on the dead corn, and then her mom's, like, putting plates down for dinner. The family's getting ready to eat, and they're like, oh, where's Susie? And her sister's like, oh, I think she's at her friend's house. Like, not, like, too concerned like you think people would be nowadays. And she's, like, walking in, you know, Mr. Harvey's trying to get her down there. She goes down there, and it's this, like, little hole in the earth. It's, like, so tiny, and there's all these stuffed animals and figurines and books, like, everything that a teenager would like. And, you know, you see it goes back and forth between her and this hideaway with Mr. Harvey, and then her family preparing for dinner. They're wondering where she is. They're getting mad. They think she went out with her friends, and she's not answering the phone, and she's in trouble now. And then you can, like, see it in Susie's eyes. I think it's when he asks her if she wants a soda, and she's like, I think I gotta get home. And she's not, like, scared at this point. She's just like, oh, well, I really gotta get home. It's getting late. And then Mr. Harvey, like, they have the camera, like, I should know what it's called because I am minoring in film. But it's where it's kind of like if you think of Psycho, there's a scene where he's, like, going over the table and you can, like, see his neck. It's really, like, uncomfortable. It's something like that. Like, it's really low and he's looking down. So you, like, feel like Susie looking up at him, and his face is dark. His eyes look crazed. He's like, be polite, be polite. And she kind of is stuck there. And then you see, like, he gives her a soda. He, like, leans over her to get the bottle opener. It's, like, very uncomfortable. And she's, like, looking at the ladder that goes out the door. And he's, like, talking, like, oh, it's nice here. And then he literally says, like, oh, you're very beautiful. And like I said, you could see it in her face. She's trying to get to go. She says she has to go. And she basically jumps towards the ladder. And Mr. Harvey grabs her. And she's fighting him off. And then she gets away. Now, like I said, you come into this knowing she's going to get murdered. So, and obviously, too, like, we weren't going to say anything when I watched it with Mauricio and friends. And, you know, she's running away. She's, like, running for her life. She runs past Ruth. And then you see the family at home. They're calling people. The dad's looking for the phone book. And he gets a picture of her. He goes to the town area where, like, the stores are. And he's talking to people, showing her picture, being like, have you seen her? Have you seen her? And then you see Susie running, and she ends up in the town, and she sees her dad, and she starts yelling for him, but the dad kind of ignores her, and then she screams it. The dad looks around, and then he looks away, and then, like, a car passes her, and then it's just, like, darkness. Nobody's there. She's all alone. She screams again, and she runs to her house, and she's, like, at this time, too, before she gets to the house, the police officer's there. And the mom's describing, you know, what she was wearing, what she looks like, where she might be, like, all this, you know, what police ask. And she gets to the house, and there's nobody in the house. It's dark. She hears everyone talking, but nobody's there, and she's freaking out. And then she goes into the bathroom, and Mr. Harvey is in the bathtub, and there's blood and dirt and corn. His clothes are all over the floor. There's blood all in the sink. She has this charm bracelet that she wears. It's on the sink. And then I guess this is kind of where she realizes she's dead, because she starts screaming, like, when Mr. Harvey sits up and the washcloth falls off his face. She starts screaming, and then, like, she kind of, like, disappears into dust. And I remember my friend who was there, he goes, wait, she didn't get away. And I'm like, no, she didn't. Because he was like, well, she got out of the thing. I said, well, yeah, well, how I guess interpreted that of her escaping is, like, that's so traumatic that, like, her soul just ran out of her body when she died. She died such a traumatic death, you know, that she just, like, her soul just ran. So then, you know, they show the police end up at the cornfields. They find her hat. In the book, let me get into this in the book. This movie's PG-13, and if this, if the movie followed more of the movie would have been rated R. They find her bone, her elbow, and that kind of, like, confirmed she's dead. In the movie, they give them her hat, but the officer does say they found a lot of blood in that area. So that also, I guess, confirms it, but that kind of makes the dad in denial, because he's like, well, you didn't find her body. But that elbow, them finding the elbow kind of establishes that she died. For the parents, not, like, obviously for us, we know that. So then, you know, her family is grieving her murder. Mr. Harvey, you see him, like, he's cleaning all his stuff up. He's cleaning his clothes. He's cleaning the bathroom. Like, he's done this before, which I'll get more into that later. But he's just cleaning, like, getting rid of the evidence. And, you know, the police come to the house. They're asking him. He's, you know, acting like, well, like, I knew her. I didn't know her. I've seen her around. And then he said something like, I knew that girl must have screamed. And it's, like, you know, eerie, because, like, we know as the audience who he is. The police don't at this point. And they start looking at his dollhouses, because he makes dollhouses, which is, like, so fucked up. And I'm pretty sure that was done on purpose, that he makes dollhouses, like, those nice, like, really nice ones. And you see that her bracelet is on the piano, like, the little, like, doll piano. And he, like, is getting up. He's kind of, like, following the police through like the house of the dollhouse, and then he like grabs it, he hides it, and you're kind of like watching it, like find the bracelet, because in the photo they have of her, you see the bracelet around her wrist. So like you're like, find it, and he gets it before the police officer can see it. And then you see, like, you know, they go back to the house. The sister Lindsay says to the dad, like, she's dead, isn't she? Like, the sister kind of accepts it quicker. Which, let me say this too, Lindsay was so ignored in this movie, and I didn't like it. After reading the book, obviously before that I didn't know her character much because I didn't read the book, so I just thought that's just who her character was. She was kind of just there in the movie. In the book, they really talk about how, like, Lindsay kind of does this herself, like, pretty much. Like, she deals with it herself. She deals with it alone. She does get a boyfriend not long after. This guy brings her a present not too long after Susie is murdered, and they start dating, and she stays with him throughout the book, and they end up getting married. And this is also why I feel like it should be a television show. It should have been the first time. It should have been like a limited series, but if they redo it, it should be a limited series, because like I liked how they had how the book really talks about Lindsay and how Lindsay goes through this. Because I know later in the movie, you know, Mr. Harvey starts eyeing her, but you see how she kind of just like throws herself into school, into sports, and she just is basically grows up overnight after this. And I just really wish they could have explored her more in the movie, like how established she was in the book. But back to the movie now. So, you know, Susie gets to the in-between, this afterlife before heaven. Now, a lot of people complain about the CGI. Excuse me. Now, I get it. Sometimes too much CGI is just like irritating, and I'll admit there's some points in the movie where I'm like, did this need to be CGI? No. I know Peter Jackson's known for the CGI, but at the same time, Lord of the Rings, I feel like that's a movie where you need the CGI for most of it, because it's very like fairy tale-ish. I know in the book, the afterlife is pretty much just her town, just not her town, like weird thing, hard to describe. But in the movie, it's like she gets on this beach and like times change. Oh wait, before she gets, so she gets there, she sees Ray, she's running to the gazebo, and she basically like just drowns and then wakes up in a gazebo, and there's this girl named Holly there. She can see Ray at the mall waiting for her, and Ruth comes and brings the note and tells him like she thinks Susie is still there, even though like Ray says she's gone, she's dead. And they flash back, and you see when Susie ran past her, she touched Ruth's hand and she was like screaming. And you know, you kind of like establish in the book, obviously they get into more, but it's established that Ruth has these powers and she can like see the dead and speak to the dead. And it's kind of like, so Susie and her have this weird connection now, even though they weren't like friends or anything when she was alive. So she meets this girl Holly, and Holly's basically telling her, you know, like, this isn't heaven or earth, this is like an in-between, but like we're gonna go to heaven one day, and we just have to like, you know, go through the trials, I guess, the steps of grief, and move on. And Susie's kind of like, no, like, I don't know what's going on. The girl's like, you're dead, accept it. And she literally says, I don't know you, and she starts running. And like, so like, this is a moment where I could see the CGI being used. There's in the beginning of the movie, her and her dad were making those ships in the bottles. I don't know what they're called, like the term, but they were making them, and that was like a thing they did together. That was their thing. And she's like running, they're in this ocean, and they start crashing, because you see on Earth, the dad is breaking the bottles, like having basically a breakdown, and he's just smashing all the bottles and crying, and she sees them, and she's freaking out in the afterlife. And then the dad kind of stops for a minute. He puts a candle on one of the boats, and like it's kind of like the flame through the window starts moving differently than it is on his end, and it's kind of like you see her going to touch it, so it's kind of like he like knows Susie's like there, even though like she's not there. So she kind of like, Holly approaches her, she literally is like, my dad knows I'm here, everything's gonna be okay. So it's kind of like she does not accept that she's dead, but she's comforting knowing like she could still like quote unquote like talk to her dad, like she's not away from him. Like she literally says like, my dad knows I'm here, it's okay. So then you kind of like, there's like this montage of Susie and this girl Holly just like, you know, having fun. And I know people complain about this, wow, I forgot the word, this CGI, and I get it. Like, sometimes, like, when I did look up IMDb, where the movie was filmed, to see, like, because it is mostly filmed in Pennsylvania when it's, like, the Earth sequences or scenes, but the CGI parts were filmed in New Zealand, and I feel like they could have went on locations to places in New Zealand, because New Zealand is beautiful, to get this, like, heavenly afterlife vibe. So, how do I put it? So I feel like there's, like, a scene where they're dancing on this ball of green, and they have, like, butterfly outfits on, and then they're dancing on a record player in, like, 70s outfits. Susie's, like, dancing in an outfit, then she's on the cover of a magazine, and she walks out of the magazine. It's very, like, over the top at times, so I can get where that CGI is what turned people off to this movie, but I feel like it shouldn't be slammed as a bad movie because of the overuse of CGI. Because, in all honesty, the really, really overused CGI is just that little, like, heaven sequence of Susie having fun in heaven and, like, enjoying this, like, impossibility, I guess, of, like, whatever she wants, she can have it. She's just, like, enjoying that aspect of this, like, heaven that's hers. So I get, like, why that's, like, too much at times, but that's really, like, it. Like, there is times when she is in heaven, it's a little, like, I forgot, there's one scene where, I think it's in the beginning, too, now I'm thinking about the scene. It literally looks like the old school windows, like, you know, the green metal with the blue sky. I'm pretty sure that's when she first gets there, but it literally looks like that. And I'm like, you could have just went to, like, a really nice location, New Zealand, and got that, like, shot. But besides the point. So, you know, like, that happens, and then her family is just, like, how else do you put it? Like, they lost their child. Like, their child was murdered. They do not know what happened to her. They don't even have her body, so they're just grieving. And, you know, the dad's name is Jack. Jack becomes so obsessed with, he wants to know who did this. Like, he is, like, he's an accountant, so he's looking through people's, like, money, taxes, I guess. He's following guys around the store. He's, like, calling the officer saying, oh, this guy's weird, this guy's weird, this guy's weird. And then, you know, the mom's just very, like, leave it alone. Not that I don't care. She just wants to move on. Like, she doesn't accept that Susie's dead, but she's accepting that, like, her daughter is gone, and, like, she just wants to move on. She just wants to deal. But she can't deal, because, like, you know, she's still a mom. She has 2 other kids. She can't really, like, move on from that, like, ever. Even though as you, like, deal with your trauma and you deal with something as tragic as that, you don't, like, get over it. But you kind of get that vibe, I guess, that the mom just wants to just get over it. Like, so the mom's name is Abigail. I should be using names. Abigail. She just wants to move on. Like, she wants to just move on, and, like, you can't. So it's also that different things of grief. And then, you know, Lindsay's so ignored, but you see her, like, they have sequences of her doing push-ups and sit-ups, and then she gets a boyfriend later, like, Susie watches her get her first kiss, all this stuff. And then, you know, the little brother was too young, so he's kind of just going with the motions. He's kind of ignored too. So the dad will not leave the police officers alone, and the mom's just kind of like a shell of a person. So the police officer suggests that the dad, like, help her out. So he invites the mother, Susan Sarandon's character, the grandma, to come live with them, which the Abigail does not like. And now the grandma comes in, and she's very like tough. She's very like, sister's dead, your mom is a shell of a person, your dad's off edge, I'm in charge now. So she's very, like, I wouldn't say, like, you know, that the grandma, obviously it hurts the grandma that her granddaughter was killed, but you show her as a strong person, and it's just like, this is life, and we have to keep on living and move on. We can't just be sad all the time. And you see how the grandma comes in, and she does not know what she's doing, and she does not know how to take care of a house. She's, like, seen as very, like, glamorous. Like, her hair's done, her makeup's done. When she first comes in, the Jack goes, are these all your bags? And she's like, are you kidding me? That's just my makeup. So she's seen very glamorous, and the Abigail's very not that, because that's her mother. Abigail's very not that. She's just regular woman, I guess, not, like, over glamorous. So the grandma comes in, she doesn't know what she's doing, but she's doing what she can. She's doing everything she can. She's helping Lindsay with her hair and makeup. She's trying to make dinner. She's trying to clean the house. She's trying to do the laundry. She's just trying to let Abigail and Jack rest. And even though she's doing a terrible job, she's still doing it. So some time passes. There's a lot, like, more happens in the movie, but I don't want to dwell on every little detail that happens. Only, like, the most important parts and things I mostly want to talk about. So eventually there's a part where the grandma and Abigail are fighting, and the grandma is saying, you don't let anyone in her room, nobody can touch her things, like, you have a tomb in the middle of your house, which she basically says. And she thinks, like, if you just seal this up, is it going to go away? And the mom leaves. The mom, you see Jack sitting on the couch, you see her get in a taxi, and she just leaves. She leaves the family. And that does happen in the book as well. They do leave out that she has an affair with the police officer, which I know in the movie it would have been too much, but like I said, if it was in a series, they could have had that, because it's like, grief makes you do things. Trauma makes you do things sometimes. And I'm not saying it's right and it's okay. Obviously, like, even if they didn't put the cheating aspect in that story, like, her leaving, like, she just abandoned her family, and it's like, that wasn't right of her, but you see how grief really affects people. So the mom leaves. She goes to California. She's working in, like, I guess a farm or a field where she's picking oranges. And Susie mentions that she tells people she only has 2 children. But the mom's, like, still has, like, Susie's photo with her. So now, like, they're just trying to live. Like, like, all this stuff is happening to them. Susie dies, and then the mom leaves, and the dad's alone. The dad doesn't know what to do. So not long after Abigail leaves the family, Mr. Harvey kind of starts to become, like, fascinated or infatuated with Lindsay, like he did with Susie earlier. And, he starts, looking through pictures of her in the newspaper. You see he has, like, photos of Susie in this book, and he has, like, a piece of her hair in this little book, and it has, like, all, like, the, like, plotting, I guess, in there. It's kind of like a diary of, like, these murders. And he starts building this elaborate, like, dome thing. Like, they never specify, like, what, like, how he was gonna lure her in it. It looks like he was gonna, like, trap her in it, because I was thinking that you always see her running, so I thought maybe he thought he could, like, catch her like an animal. I don't know. It's never really explained. It's not too important, I guess. So one day, I forgot how it, like, happens, but Jack just ends up in Mr. Harvey's backyard, and they're, like, he's helping him tie this trap together, obviously not knowing what it's for, and Jack just seems so out of it. And there's the bushes in front of him, like the flower bushes that Susie was taking pictures of, and Jack picks one up, and then you see Susie is in the in-between, and she finds this safe, and she opens it, and one of the flowers are in it, and she's holding it, and she's, like, thinking about her dad, and then Jack's holding the flower, and the flower's dead, and then it blooms. Now, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be, like, a supernatural thing, or it's just in Jack's mind. Like, I guess everyone's interpretation. How I see it is that it doesn't happen. It's just Jack's mind, and also, like, him, like, in a way, putting the pieces together and figuring out it's Mr. Harvey. So, like, literally Mr. Harvey, like, runs into his house. Jack's, like, kicking the door down, screaming at him. The police officer comes over. I'm sorry, I don't remember the police officer's name, and to be honest, he's not even that important in the movie, like, as, like, he was in the book. But besides that, he comes to the house, and he's, like, yelling at Jack, saying, like, you've gone too far this time. You're lucky you're not going to jail. Like, you can't just do that. And then Lindsay's, like, obviously taking her dad's side, and is like, well, like, he should have, like, beat him up, and, like, the officer's kind of using that as, like, oh, like, look how your kids are acting, and Lindsay's like, why don't you listen to him? Why don't you look into this? And the police officer's like, we don't have the evidence or proof to do that. All that. So Jack is kind of just like, like, we got to give this up. He hugs the police officer and is basically, like, in his, like, to the police officer, like, I'm done searching. So then, I can't remember what comes first. I think what happens is Jack follows him into a cornfield. Yeah. Sorry, I like, just watched the movie, and I'm already, like, forgetting the timeline. I'm so sorry. But Jack follows Mr. Harvey into the cornfield, and he's following Susie's friend from the beginning. She's going in there with her boyfriend. And then Susie, like, ends up, like, the gazebo that's, like, in the afterlife is, like, in the cornfield. Like, obviously, like, she's not actually there. It's just, like, she's watching it happen. And the dad's chasing Mr. Harvey, and he accidentally runs into the friend, and the friend's boyfriend beats him up with the bat, and, like, Susie's watching it, and she's crying. And then, so he ends up in the hospital, and, like, you know, Susie is in the afterlife just watching this, not knowing what to do. She's angry. She's hateful. She hates Mr. Harvey. She says she wants him to die. And Holly's like, you need to, like, accept the fact that everybody dies, and soon you'll learn that. So then, I can't remember what happens first, but I'll do what first happens before. I'm pretty sure this is what happens first. Is Susie, Mr. Harvey's house, like, when she was laying in the gazebo, she would always see it. And, like, she needs to go into the house, obviously, to, like, start accepting her death, but she can't. And then eventually she finally does it after the dad ends up in the hospital. So she goes in, and, you know, she slowly sees all the other girls that Mr. Harvey has murdered in the past. And, you know, she says their ages, their names, where they were murdered, what year they were murdered. And she ends with her, and you find out that Mr. Harvey did cut up her body. He put it in a bag, and he's keeping it in a safe in the basement. And that's, like, where it ends. It ends with her, and you also find out that the girl Holly that has been in heaven with her, or the afterlife, is a victim of Mr. Harvey, that he murdered her a few years before he murdered Susie. So, like, a little bit after that, it's, like, back on Earth, I guess, and Lindsay's running with the track team, and she passes Mr. Harvey's house, and she sees him leave, and she decides to break into his house. Now, this scene is, like, so anxiety-inducing. So, like, she goes into the house, and, you know, she's, like, trying to, like, keep everything the way it was. She's looking around. There's, like, a scene where she's looking through the drawers, and the newspaper gets thrown at the door, and it's a bang, and, like, I remember jumping every time, not even the first time, I just jump every time it happens, because it's so unexpected, even when you expect it. So she's looking around the house, and she goes into his room, and the floor squeaks. So, you know, she moves the carpet, and she finds the floorboard is, like she can move it. And when she opens it, she pulls out that book, and she's looking for the book, and she finds the piece of Susie's hair and the photo, like, her photo next to it. And at that time, Mr. Harvey comes home. And it's, like, in a way, like, dead silent. Like, you see, like, Lindsay's, like, slowly trying to put the floorboard back without making a noise, and you see Mr. Harvey's just standing there and, like, just, like, waiting for something to happen, and then she drops it, and it makes, like, a little, like, plop sound, and Mr. Harvey just runs up the stairs. She's, like, opening the window, and she literally rolls off the side of the house and, like, hits the ground, and then, like, you know, the wind just gets knocked out of her because she just, like, whacked onto the ground. And you see, like, he's running downstairs, Mr. Harvey's running downstairs, and then she gets up and runs, thankfully. And, you know, around this time when she gets home, Abigail comes home. And she kind of, like, doesn't know what to do because she has the book, like, this is the proof that they've been wanting. And Abigail comes home, and so Lindsay kind of just, like, doesn't know what to do. Like, she doesn't want to announce that she knows Mr. Harvey killed Susie, like, right when the mom comes home. But the grandma corners her and is like, what's wrong with you? Because you see her hair is all messy. She's all sweaty. She's out of breath. And the grandma says, what's wrong? And she, like, shows the grandma the book. And then you see, like, Mr. Harvey just books it out of town. And he leaves. And then the police are there. They're looking for him. And, you know, he's gone. He left before they even got there. And then Susie meets one of the girls. Her name was Flora Hernandez. She's at this tree. Because in the beginning, I forgot to mention this. In the beginning, Holly points at this tree. And all, like, the leaves fall off. And it's, like, birds. And Holly's like, that's where we're gonna go. But we need to settle everything here, and then we're gonna go to heaven. We're gonna go past the tree. And finally, like, all the birds come back, and Susie goes and meets one of the girls, and, you know, all the other victims, like, their souls, I guess, come meet Susie. And they're like, all right, like, Holly's like, let's go, like, we're gonna go to heaven. And Susie's like, not yet. So what happens is she goes back to Earth, and, you know, Ruth lives near this sinkhole that in the beginning of the movie they go to. They throw, like, her and her family throw a refrigerator in it. And it's like you pay the guy and you can throw junk in it. So she lives there. And I also forgot to mention that she's been hanging out with Ray a lot. Like, they kind of form a friendship after this. So her and Ray are at her house, and, you know, Mr. Harvey's booking it out of town, and he is like, him and this guy are kicking the safe into the sinkhole, and Ruth is watching it, and then all of a sudden, like, Susie appears in the window and, like, basically takes over her body, and then like, she's calling for Ray comes in, she, like, covers her face, and then he sees Susie's face, and she, like, asks him to kiss her, and he kisses her. And then I also seen debate if it's, like, really he does see Susie's face, like the same thing with the flower. It's, does he really see Susie's face, or is it, like, in his head? I personally feel like for this one, he does see Susie's face in that moment, because, like, you know, it's mentioned in the book a lot more. It's, like I said, briefly mentioned Ruth has these abilities, but in the book it's very, like, she could see mostly just women who have been brutally murdered. Like, there's a part when she goes to college and she sees all these, like, dead women in the park, and then the scene where Susie takes over her body, Mr. Harvey actually drives past her while she's walking with Ray, and she sees all of, like, the spirits of the women he's murdered in the car, and then Susie falls down to earth. So it is very different. And also Susie and Ray have sex instead in the book, and in the movie it's just a kiss, which I like that it was just the first kiss. I get why they have that theme of sex in the book, which I guess works too. I'm not saying, like, that theme or, like, storyline shouldn't be in there, but I do like how it's just, like, the kiss in the movie. So, you know, like, you know, Susie gets her first kiss. Like, that's just one thing she wanted. She never got her first kiss. And then she moves on. She goes on to heaven. And then you kind of see, like, the family just trying to cooperate. You know, Lindsay and the boyfriend, you can see Lindsay's pregnant. The mom's home. The dad's going back to work. And it just seems like they're very, not happy, but just, like, they're moving on with life. And that's, like, where the movie ends, really. You see Susie ends it with, I was here for a moment and then I was gone. I wish you all a long, happy life. So that's the movie. Not all the movie, but that's what I wanted to talk about for the movie. Before I end, I just want to talk about, like, some little things about the movie. I love how when it's Earth, because this movie was filmed in PA, it was filmed all over Pennsylvania, but this movie, like, captures, like, how beautiful Pennsylvania is. Like, I know if you're not from the area, if you probably heard stuff about PA, and, like, sometimes they're not wrong, but PA is very beautiful. It's a very, very beautiful place. And I feel like when they're showing the landscapes and showing, like, Susie's home and the area, like, it's very beautiful, and they just really, really captured how beautiful PA is. So I feel like that's why I kind of wish when I found out the heaven scenes were filmed in New Zealand, but at, like, a studio, I'm like, but you had so much beautiful landscape to do, like, a heaven thing in New Zealand. So is an artistic choice I will agree on. I'm not anti-CGI, but I could see where the CGI just becomes a little I just really don't want people to not like this movie because of the CGI, because, to be honest, it's just a mere fact in it. There's those random, like, little scenes where the CGI becomes a little much, but then there's like, it's still a story. It's a very good story. It's a very important story. So I really feel like if you can handle it, get that first. If you can handle it, watch the movie. And if you can really handle it, read the book. But I suggest the movie first, because even though it has those dark themes, it's not as graphic as the book is. So the book isn't for everyone, but I feel like more people can enjoy this movie because it doesn't have those disturbing scenes. But at the end of the day, not everyone likes movies like this, and that's okay. So, I guess this is the end. I did want to mention, I didn't really get into it in the recording, but there was a really good video essay I watched before I recorded this. Sorry, I'm just moving my chair if you hear a squeak. It's called The Lovely Bones is Scarier Than We Remember, and it's by Quality Culture, which I will link that in the, like, description to watch that. It's a very good video essay. A lot of what they said in that video is very much what I agree with, and I very much liked it, because they also, like, really defend this movie, and they do touch on the CGI. But let me see. They mention, I'm just writing it down. Oh, she mentions how grief is the plot, because also another reason people didn't like this movie is they thought it was going to be a gritty, like, crime whodunit, and it has that little bit of that vibe to it, but it's about grief. It's about a family grieving and Susie grieving. So I feel like also marketing wise, because when you watch the trailer, it looks very suspenseful and thrilling, and then you watch it and it has that suspenseful moments, but it's more drama based, I'll say that. I don't want to say calm, so obviously it's not a calm story, but it has a calm feeling with the music and the way it's filmed. But when I watched that video and they said, like, grief is the plot, that's what I, like, guess that's what it clicked. I never thought of it like that. I'm like, that makes sense, because it's literally about grief. It's about people grieving and dealing with these horrible things that happen in life, and like how different people grieve, and what things like murder does to a family. How there's so many families in the world that not just lose their daughters, lose their sons, lose their brothers or sisters, their moms and dad to things like murder. And it's just, I like that this movie doesn't get too into the true crime, because, you know, we have ID Discovery, we have so many podcasts on true crime, we can find anything we want to hear, like the crime story. But I feel like a movie about just people grieving and coming to terms with something like a death or a murder and just trying to move on with life, I feel like that's the important story to be told. That's a really important story to be told. And I like how Susie is so important. She's the victim in this, and like I stated earlier, that a lot of the times you just see them in flashbacks and before they're murdered, but we don't know what they feel, how they're feeling. So I really like that, and I feel like this movie is really great, and it just gets a bad rap because of the CGI. So if you listen to this and you feel about The Lovely Bones, I encourage you to rewatch it and just don't think too much about the CGI. Think about the story, think about what's happening, think about that grief, that like heartbreak that this family is going through. So I guess, I'm still doing the letter grades, even though I'm alone. I'm going to give this movie, I'll give it an A-, because it does lose the points for the CGI. I'm not saying it's not bad, but it's a good movie. It's a very good movie. It's currently on Netflix, so you got Netflix, watch it. I'm pretty sure you can rent it on Prime. And if you like Saoirse Ronan too, if you love Lady Bird, I do want to do an episode on Lady Bird, because that is an amazing movie. If you like Saoirse Ronan's acting, please watch this movie. She was only 13 when she did this, and like that just shows like how great of an actress she was going to be as she got older. So A- for The Lovely Bones. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.